The first inception of Alien vs Predator as an official product was delivered by Dark Horse Comics in 1989. Credited to artist and editor Chris Warner, comics featuring the crossover have seen continued publication and new releases every few years. The first on-screen nod towards a brawl between the intergalactic threats was in Predator 2 in 1990, with an alien skull being seen on the Predator's ship. Alien vs Predator as a franchise would find avenues in video games as well. In 1993 on the Super Nintendo and Game Boy, 1994 in an arcade cabinet and on the Atari Jaguar, and in 1999 on Mac and PC. In 2001, Monolith Productions, Sierra Online, and Fox Interactive released Alien vs Predator 2, the unconnected sequel to the first game released 2 years prior. A first-person shooter comprised of 3 unique campaigns set from the perspective of a xenomorph alien, a predator, and a colonial marine. Rebellion was still making additional content for the original game, so Fox tasked Monolith with the game's follow-up. Fox also supplied them with a wealth of information, giving them access to film footage and behind-the-scenes images, particularly from the studio of Stan Winston. The new Lithtech engine also helped set the mood, allowing the inclusion of animated light mapping and dynamic light sources to better emulate casted shadows. In the current year, acquiring a copy of Alien vs Predator 2 is notoriously difficult. You won't find it on Steam or Good Old Games, and it's essentially abandonware. It shares a similar fate to No One Lives Forever, also developed and released by Monolith a year prior. Games like these remain in ownership purgatory, essentially belonging to Warner Brothers, Disney, and Activision at the same time. Can you imagine how big of a headache it would be to try and get these 3 companies to agree on something, let alone something as minute as a 21-year-old game? For more information about the complexity of multi-corporate ownership, as much fun as that sounds, I urge you to check out the Kotaku article in the description. It also talks about Night Dive Studios, the group responsible for getting System Shock 2 and the Wizardry series back from the grave, re-released and working on modern hardware. In November 2008, Sierra officially turned off the multiplayer servers and support for Alien vs Predator 2. You might be surprised to learn, however, that Alien vs Predator 2 still has an active multiplayer scene. Private servers are still running to this day. Before taking a more in-depth look at each campaign, I'd like to make it clear that I think this game is worth playing if you get a chance, especially if you're a big fan of the Alien or Predator universes. The tone, atmosphere, music, and really the overall aesthetic of the game really helps make for an enjoyable experience. The action is punchy, the 3 protagonists all feel very different to play, and the story beats are decently balanced. The Colonial Marines campaign follows most of the hallmarks one would expect at this point, as well as a few tropes and cliches that were tired even by the start of the new millennia. You fill the combat boots of Corporal Andrew Harrison, nicknamed Frosty as his chest armor clearly states, one of the rootinest, tootinest, most boringest characters aboard the USS Verloc. As you can probably guess, you and your crew of rugged, barely 1 trait per character Marines are tasked with investigating a distress beacon coming from an isolated research facility, very cutely named the Primary Operations Complex. The pace at which the mission falls apart is absolutely breakneck. Your airship gets downed by hurricane winds and is partially damaged.
I can fix it, but it'll take me an hour or so.
You're cut off from the rest of your team mere moments after starting the game. And literally seconds after that, you witness an invisible threat kill 2 people right in front of your face. And then a room of flayed bodies. And then a bridge blows up. And then a truck. And then this guy falls out of the sky. It's a little bit of a surprising subversion to see the Predator make an appearance so early, though you don't have any active engagements with it until the endgame, where you might expect. But you forge ahead, switch the power on, and activate the landing beacon, inadvertently attracting the attention of an alien hive nearby. Most Marines escape, save for Sergeant Hall, who is captured by da aliens.
Where's Hall? She's gone, Frosty.
Harrison, confident in his ability as the main character, goes in to save her, which brings us to the secondary meaning of his call sign. His nickname Frosty is supposed to denote his ability to stay cool in dangerous situations, but it also doubles to characterize his unfortunate luck with the ladies. More on that later. As a side note, it's also shared with Rico Frost in Aliens. Sergeant Hall is, of course, strung up in alien goop and says the famous line,
Kill me. Kill me.
Obviously a little shaken up, Harrison flashes forward 6 weeks to the next mission. In this mission, the bunker door won't open for the Marine's car to get through. This is explained through some banter between Duke and Sergeant Johnson from Halo.
I don't think open sesame is gonna work, sir. How about we use Duke as a battering ram?
Frosty goes it alone and opens the airlock-style gates one by one. A few skirmishes along the way, and eventually you find the welding torch and a smart gun. The guns are faithfully adapted from the movies. using the exact sounds, and especially the smart gun, they feel particularly weighty. The auxiliary tools like the aforementioned welding torch and hacking device, while functionally the same and require zero thought to actually use, do add a little flair and help break up the pacing somewhat. Eventually, you and the other Marines arrive at the forward observation pod, meeting up with the very much, definitely not evil, General Vasily Rykov and Dr. Arnard Eisenberg. Harrison goes to do some computer jargon and meets Dunya, one of the Russian militia known as the Iron Bears. Frosty then openly exclaims his woes as an incel.
Men like my fiancé, Dmitri.
Your fiancé? Man, my luck never changes.
More on Dmitri later. Massive twist, the Marines are betrayed by the corporate goons and its militia, and Harrison is thrown in prison. And here we are treated to just some stellar voice acting.
What crime were you convicted of?
I'm not a convict. I'm a Marine.
Thanks to your cellmate, who has a fucking bayonet for some reason, you bust out of the joint and commence a long haul of fighting humans instead of xenomorphs. The interiors here are all very well crafted and have a lot of attention to detail. There was clearly a lot of care taken to make it look as authentic as possible. You fight a Predalien with almost no build-up, literally one sound cue and it pops out of the vent and then dies like straight away, like immediately. Fight your way through the laboratories where we run across a predator in a glass coffin. Since he's got nothing to say and just sort of stares rudely, we move on to the next part of the lab where we're introduced to a new character over the radio.
Soldier, in 30 seconds you'll be dead.
What?
Very obviously a woman with a voice modulator character tells you to grab a disc for them because you have to.
I'm a Marine, not a delivery boy.
Yeah, man. Woo! Alright. One take Tony, that's what we call him. Make your way past a bunch of alien eggs in stasis, swim through the tunnel, turn off the stasis field and some security measures so you can proceed. Take a momentary break from doing murder to look at the little monkey. A lot of the next section in the crew quarters is a little confusing due to the layout and feels like busy work. It was by far the area I spent the most time in, mostly due to backtracking and quick loading. These doors also bugged out for me a couple of times, which I think has something to do with the fact that there's an NPC on the other side. I was going to use cheats to no-clip through, but it unbugged when I hit enter to type the code in. It was truly bizarre. This horror sound effect plays when you walk into the showers for some reason. Is this some sort of commentary on gaming culture? Who does this shit belong to? A bunch of Smash players? Continue through to the room above where you ran into the Predator. Grab the disc for the radio lady and head back to the elevator. We're then treated to some great exteriors. While I would stop short of calling it breathtaking, the amount of unique areas you move through all have their own flair. In the entry bay, you have a mini-boss fight with an exosuit, which takes a grand total of 4 rockets to take down, which you're given right before the fight. And then, we get the big reveal that the person on the radio is in fact, wowie zowie, a woman named Tamiko. Frosty can barely contain his excitement.
You're a girl?
She's also leagues better as a voice actor than he is.
My brother, he died while he was stationed here. Accidental death, according to the report. Eisenberg signed it himself.
I'm sorry.
My brother was a very meticulous man.
I'm sorry.
Tamiko is voiced by Jen Taylor, who also plays Cortana in Halo. Hop in the whip and head out to intercept your squad before they find themselves in the same fate as Sergeant Hall. Here you make a descent into a partial hive to turn the power back on. There's a lot more set-piece battles in the second half of the game, like here, where you're waiting for a crane to move some boxes while xenomorphs pour into the area. A quick glimpse of a more grown-up alien known as a Praetorian through a closing door, and then you're heading upwards. You take a ride on a peculiar elevator. So you ride up to a point where the elevator stops abruptly and the lights go out. If you stay on the elevator, a whole swarm of aliens descend upon you. If you kill them all, a blast from an unseen predator destroys the platform and you fall. If you jump off the elevator as soon as it stops, it gets destroyed immediately and no aliens spawn in. It's truly odd. Heading through this industrial valley, after being the receiver of many cheap shots, you actually finally get to face off against the predator. At long last, you reconvene with your pilot and get dropped off at the mouth of the hive. But not just dropped off in a fucking exosuit.
This militarized version of the P-5000 workloader comes fully equipped with twin rotary guns, rocket launchers, and a flamethrower. Nicknamed Alice by the Marines that use it, this power armor suit is capable of reaching speeds greater and heights higher than your average human. Flashlight not included. Get your hands on the P-5000 powered workloader today.
Down in the depths, there's a cool little environmental set piece where you have to clear away some alien gamer gunk from these geothermal reactors. Continue through the archaeological dig site, descending through to the final area of the game. You great clumsy oaf, you've broken your militarized power armor, but not to worry, dust yourself off, grab your only remaining firearm, a pistol with not very many shots left, and rescue your team. They're just around the corner. You arrive at the finale of the game. Before you sits a fairly faithful rendition of a space jockey, and at long last, you come face to face with the alien queen, politely waiting for you to unload all of your pistol ammo directly into its face. The rest of the arena has most every weapon in the game scattered about, which does trivialize the boss fight somewhat. Dispatching the beast opens up the last stretch, running up this massive hill to the dropship on the heels of your team. You make a final stand right at the edge of a cliff until the alien queen resurfaces with the ship dispatching her before she gets you. Finally airborne, Harrison calls through to Tomiko, but she explains she can't go on a date right now because she's literally going to blow up the facility with herself inside of it.
Take care, Andrew. Tomiko out.
Tomiko! Tomiko!
Overall, the human missions run about 3 hours and some change, and that was with a decent amount of fucking around on my behalf. Some of the weapons and enemy varieties feel more like they were designed with the multiplayer in mind, like the grenade launcher, for instance, has 4 different ammo types, including timed and proximity mines, which I never used. The inclusion of different types of aliens is also mostly cosmetic, but it does lend some variety to what you're shooting at. Overall, the alien AI is a bit hit and miss. I found that there were some pathing issues, most notably with the facehugger. The aliens are absurdly fast and close the gap almost immediately if you're not anticipating them. The motion tracker can help with this, but it only pings what's in front of you, so you'll be spinning around to check your back constantly. Besides, you're more likely to be alerted to the xenomorph's presence by the blaring combat music. This portion of the game begins with a rather well done cinematic flashback, 10 years before the current events take place. The camera pans through the first expedition of LV-1201. Marked as a complete failure, decimated by the xenomorphs, we arrive at Dr. Eisenberg, the sole survivor, bloody and in shambles. Despite much of the franchise ascribing the downfall of humans to its own greed, this intro does a decent job at humanizing the primary antagonist. On the flip side of that, a lot of the campaign tries to empower the player's desire to kill the humans put in front of them. Flash forward to the present, and Eisenberg is the head of the primary operations complex, where he is facing mounting pressure from the Weyland-Yutani Corporation over unsanctioned research, artifacts going missing, and a complete loss of an outlying facility. After some additional cutscenes, we see a crate being loaded onto a ship, the contents of which is an alien egg. But oh no, it fell over, and out spills the facehugger, and the game begins. The movement is the most unique of the 3 campaigns. With the inclusion of wall climbing, there is a lot more verticality. As a Marine, exploration is rewarded as health and ammo pickups are often tucked away in nooks and crannies. But as the alien, the exploration is required just to progress. While the environments are still well rendered and rather unique from the other missions, the levels are also extremely linear. The Alien campaign doesn't have the benefit of story beats doled out by your comrades. Rather, the primary driving force is seen through graded vents and cracks in the wall, mostly exposition delivered by a handful of top minds working at the primary operations complex. As you make your way through these ventilation systems and crawl spaces, you follow one particularly assholish gentleman.
Is it necessary to stand right in the middle of the corridor?
No, sir.
Who you track and corner asleep in his quarters. Impregnating the isolated host, the passage of time allows you to gestate into the next stage of the alien's life cycle. Without limbs, the chest burster doesn't maintain the same wall climbing ability as the facehugger, and is uniquely vulnerable, primarily serving as a stealth section that you can mostly blunder your way through without a great deal of care. Avoiding all the scary men with guns, you find a quiet spot to get your calories in for the day, which leads us to the saddest part of the game. I won't play the sound effect, but you bust into an animal holding and eat a whole bunch of cats, and it's really It sucks. Now fully grown, you are free to unleash your arsenal on humanity. Despite not having access to the array of weapons like the human or predator, the xenomorph has a variety of options to dispatch its prey. Your standard claw attack swipes, slashes, and dismembers. The alternate is a tail whip, which serves to temporarily stun most enemies. All your attacks requiring melee and fighting against ranged opponents means you're almost certainly going to sustain some damage in most encounters. Thankfully, lining up your reticle with an enemy's head allows you to do the classic alien inner-mouth headbite to regain health. Standard attacks also give some health, but not as much, and performing the actual headbite is a little trickier than you might imagine. As the headbite is contextual to aiming at the head, it's quite easy to miss the bite and attack with the claws by accident, which can cause you to destroy the head in the process. Finally, to help you close the gap on ranged attackers, which again is most of them, you can perform a devastating lunge attack, throwing your entire body against an enemy at huge range for massive damage. The drawback for one-shotting most humans being that it will leave nothing left behind to eat. Along the way, you find some of your fully formed alien brethren in captivity awaiting experimentation. You free them with the control panel in the only way you can interact with objects and meet up with them outside. From here, you continue through more distinct but fairly mundane areas, climbing deeper into the facility until you come up against a predator. The fight culminates with its helmet coming off and the maniacal laughter and rapid counting down of the predator's self-destruction device, very reminiscent of the 1987 movie. Luckily, this predator wasn't as well equipped, and the resulting explosion is avoidable. The damage it causes, however, breaches the primary operations complex's drainage system, which allows thousands of xenomorphs loose and allows you to escape. 6 weeks later, we see Dunya's husband Dimitri and an engineer performing maintenance to one of the fences. The power is ominously cut, leaving the two vulnerable to a swarm of aliens that immediately descends upon them. This is inadvertently caused by Harrison deactivating the security protocols when trying to move the armored personnel carrier in Mission 2, ironically titled Collateral Damage.
I'm sorry.
The following segment has the most immediate gameplay crossover between the other campaigns, affecting events and passing through several of the same areas. Destroying a stasis control panel, you release the Predalien that makes short work of the two scientists in front of it. While the direct story in the alien missions is fairly simplistic, especially without companions to guide your quest, it does contain the most amount of world building and exposition. While crawling through a vent, you pass by an amphitheater with General Rykov giving a full presentation of their plan to capture the alien queen. It's nearly 4 minutes long, has a slideshow and a question and answer session. You don't have to listen, you can walk right by it, but I thought that its lengthy inclusion was quite captivating, mostly due to the delivery by Jeff Steitzer, the multiplayer announcer for Halo.
Mommy milkers.
You pass by the Predator in his space bed once again. I think this may be the only part of the game where the three campaigns intersect so specifically. Because this only occurs once, it's easier to digest as not being overly contrived. A little further along, you find an artificially created alien hive and destroy the controls, letting loose even more xenomorph into the system. You begin your descent down into the alien hive to find the Empress, fighting combat synthetics and disabling explosives along the way. But alas, you are too late. Eisenberg has already made off with the alien mommy and also plans to leave the planet with her. One final trek through a bunch of oversized industrial areas before we start seeing glimpses of another predator. He blows up a truck, we wrestle, bing bang boom, alien versus predator. The last stretch of the game, you follow Eisenberg up this giant elevator, make your way through a bunch of convoluted rooms to destroy electronic MacGuffins, then admire another predator shooting synthetics from the big window before you head out to fight it. The final boss of sorts is against not one, but two predators. Well, sort of. The little one you go toe-to-toe with, while the big one sits up on a raised platform and shoots nets down at you. Funnily enough, the predators suffer from friendly fire. The only time one of these nets hit on target was on its ally. Maybe they're not really friends. Maybe the bigger predator wanted all the glory. Maybe he's an alien sympathizer and really just wanted to leave. Destroy the landing beacon proper, watch the dropship crash, and pounce on Eisenberg to finish off the game. The Doctor is revealed to be a synthetic and is cocooned in the hive to live out the rest of his existence, tormented by the creatures he sought to control. While the Alien campaign has the least amount of new mechanics or weapons to drip feed to the player, it is extremely short. My total playtime ended up being under 2 hours, which honestly works to its benefit. Length aside, it does suffer the most from its own design. The Xenomorph is extremely fast and clings to walls, which can make navigating tight corridors and winding vents quite disorienting. With the added verticality, straightforward navigation gets a little muddier. There are some great design choices that help draw the player's eye in the direction of where to go, but these are less common. These are ultimately minor complaints that don't hinder the overall experience too greatly. You still feel like an alien killing machine, and some of the quieter moments where you're able to stalk up on your prey feel quite powerful and similar to the movies. The mission begins with another flashback to our antagonist's unfortunate backstory. This time to General Rykov. 19 years prior to the events of the game, a Marine camp has been completely decimated and Rykov, being the last survivor, is hunted by a predator named Prince. Rykov is blasted from a ledge, but manages to survive, falling into a crevasse before being rescued. Flash forward to the present, Rykov now lives with an artificial spine that causes constant pain, a harsh reminder of past events. Neglecting medication in an attempt to keep his mind intact, he dispatches a team to track an energy surge and a large ship setting down near the forward observation pods, and this is where the game starts proper. You control the previously mentioned Prince, hunting in a fairly remote-looking area. Like the Alien, the Predator has somewhat more verticality to the gameplay, but it's the rhythm of combat that's quite different. It's more methodical, more meticulous. A greater emphasis is placed on approaching a situation slowly, making a plan, and then executing it. Given the cloaking device and the extremely long-range spear gun, which is essentially a sniper rifle, the Predator has the strongest focus on stealth by far. Stalking humans from the treetops, the Predator howling, and the game keeping score when you decapitate your enemies feels good. I will never tire of the booming laughter when you impale a Marine's fucking head off. All the attention to detail is fantastic and the sound design is true to form once again. Aside from the cloaking device, you have all the tools one would expect, plus more. 4 vision modes, normal, 1 for tracking humans, 1 for aliens, and 1 for other predators and their gear. You can zoom in tremendously far using the helmets and still use your weapons. 2 melee weapons, the iconic wrist blade and a telescopic spear known as the combi stick. The smart disc, which you acquire early on, homes in on enemies while you're using the right vision mode and can be returned to the player automatically. Given that you'll undoubtedly take some damage during some encounters and your suit power is not unlimited, you're given tools to circumvent this. The Medicomp makes an appearance here, though it does kind of look like Prince is just stabbing himself with 2 knives. Using the Medicomp completely refills your health and drains half your maximum power. You have another device called the Power Sifter, which takes a few seconds to use, slows your movement, and refills your entire power meter. The ebb and flow of combat is usually bookended by the use of both of these tools. The Predator has the most advanced, prolific, and extensive arsenal by far, and you continue to collect more weapons and gadgets throughout the campaign, easily eviscerating your way through the start of the game, even taking out a Praetorian along the way. Praetorians kind of look like the alien queens, but they're not. They're bigger than normal aliens, and they basically serve as the royal guard to the queen or empress. Come to a clearing and find that your allies have been taken captive, so you trail the convoy to the forward observation pod once again, doing a little sneaky stealth, bounding over the electric fence and slipping up to the elevator to head inside. Climb your way up through this part of the facility until you fall into a snare and get knocked out. General Rykov shows up to take your helmet as a trophy, the memories of Prince clearly still fresh in his mind. Then we finally see this level from the Predator's perspective, seeing both the alien and Harrison from inside the capsule. Now your mission remains the same, but you've been stripped of most all of your weapons and abilities. Limited to the wrist blade, sneak your way about and try not to think about how your victory screech every time you take a head doesn't alert every person in the entire facility. A few more skirmishes and find the remote detonator, a powerful explosive device. Then, one room over, recover your ally's mask, which functions the same as your own, and the net gun. A few more fights, grab the combi spear and the cloaking device, another room over, the power sifter and a medicomp, and at last, the weapon you've been waiting for, the shoulder-mounted plasma caster. Honestly, it's the go-to for the rest of the game. There's certainly some utility in the other weapons, but nothing quite as rock and roll as the iconic blaster. It sounds exactly how you'd expect, it fires extremely fast, uses very little power, dispatches most enemies in 1 to 2 shots, and has automatic lock-on and homing projectiles if you use the correct vision mode. It was honestly a wise choice not giving the player access to it until the halfway mark because it outperforms most every other weapon. A quick cutscene further exploring the volatile relationship between Dr. Eisenberg and General Rykov before it's on to the next section. A rather difficult segment with tons of enemies, turrets, and one particular bastard of a synth with a rocket launcher. The projectile is so fast and the synths really do have a massive amount of health. The bay doors open and then you jump out and ride on top of a dropship, which is pretty tight. The ship then crashes and you end up in a cave network that connects to the pod's sewers, leading to another great set piece underground. Walking along these pipes over irradiated looking water, you're ambushed by 2 predaliens. You continue past a nest of alien eggs and then there's this giant, well, what I can only describe as a skeleton of something. I initially thought this was some sort of exploded pipe due to the color and texture, but this is clearly a ribcage and a skull. Whatever it belonged to, it's absolutely massive. A bit further along, head up a lift, crank the primary antenna, and head out into the landing bay, which looks suspiciously like a boss arena. Hack the array power, and then suffer another alien ambush, which includes a Praetorian. A human dropship flies by, blows up the massive gate you want to get through, and is then attacked by the Predator ship. It cruises by very closely, and then cloaks as it leaves, which is pretty neat. You're then presented with a smart disk from a Predator friend. A frienditor, if you will. Get it? Frienditor. It's like Predator. Now that you've contacted your clan, you've been promptly rearmed, and you're heading down into the alien hive to finish off Rykov and recover your helmet. You continue down through an excavation, passing through more of the megatunnels as you did with Frosty, fighting through horde after horde of aliens. Another cutscene with Rykov, strapped up with an exosuit. He is prepared for his encounter with Prince. Crawl through this tunnel, find a dead Predator, and take his plasma pistol. That's really what it's called, and man, there are just a lot of parallels to Halo here. Plasma pistol is really just a worse version of the plasma caster. I think it has a larger explosion radius, but when you're dealing with enemies that get into melee as quickly as possible, it's more of a danger to yourself than anything else. More industrial areas, another Praetorian, and then there's this cool little platforming set piece. It's not particularly difficult. Somehow Rykov radios through to you, exclaiming how much of a jerk he thinks you are.
I've met your kind before. You could not kill me. I have seen you without your mask. I am not afraid of you.
It's kind of a shame. This section seems like it was purpose-built to keep the player occupied with a quiet activity so Jeff Steitzer could monologue over it, but he only has one line when you start climbing and then one when you finish. It's a bit of a missed opportunity.
Do you hear that? The bugs are coming for us. My gear will protect me. I cannot say the same for you.
The next segment is mostly shooting aliens and trying to navigate the absolutely twisted mess that is their hive. I got turned around a few times and went in circles, and it was a little frustrating, but it's extremely appropriate for an alien nest. Exiting through a tunnel, you come across this massive structure. It's not particularly remarkable looking, but its sheer size and scope, as well as the fact that it's so far underground, fills me with wonder and dread. The inside, as it is with its surroundings, are enveloped by the alien hive, and at its core, this giant mass suspended above a pit. As an appetizer to the final boss, we get to face off against an alien queen. This matchup is probably the most enjoyable one to actually play out in the game. You're basically forced down to meleeing her, and it's honestly pretty intense. It's not a multi-phase extravaganza, but it's solid. A swarm of very patient aliens rush in after you dispatch their leader, and then you're immediately onto your final encounter with Rykov.
Come, Hunter. Let us finish this.
His exosuit makes him one tough boy. I tried a few different methods until I remembered the Predator that very purposefully bequeathed me a smart disk a little earlier. Skulking around in the shadows and launching assaults from a distance turned out to be incredibly effective, and it was honestly one of the most Predator-feeling moments in the game. It really served to bookend the campaign, having started in a very similar fashion. Rykov tumbles from the exosuit, defeated, crawling on his belly, much as he did so many years prior. Prince completes the hunt, taking back his mask and Rykov's artificial spine as his ultimate trophy. In the game's epilogue, we see the USS Verloc that carries the remaining colonial marines heading into far-off space. Not far behind, though, follows a Predator ship, pursuing them to the next hunt. It's almost difficult to compare the three campaigns to one another, with such drastically different playstyles. The Marine offers the most unrestrained running and gunning with a small arsenal of firepower. It also has the strongest moment-to-moment storyline, due to Frosty being able to interact with other characters. The alien perspective feels extremely reminiscent of the movies. Getting to live through the entire xenomorph life cycle is an important part of the experience, and can feel quite liberating once you get the hang of it. Finally, the Predator has the greatest set of tools to play the game with. The stealth, the variety of gadgets and weapons that all support one another, the pace of combat being peaks and valleys. Overall, the game's design is fantastic. I wouldn't say the game is the most fun you could possibly have, but I feel that it's more than the sum of its parts. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please consider liking and subscribing. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so at patreon.com/abuffwizard. Until next time, be kind and farewell.